This is Shlomo Swidler, CEO of Orchestratus, Tuesday, October 15th, 2013. Welcome to the next episode of the OpenStack Israel podcast. This is your host, Shlomo Swidler, CEO of Orchestratus. On today's program, we have a special guest, Ryan Grenard, Vice President Platform Engineering at PayPal. How are you doing, Ryan?
Morning, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Sure, my pleasure. We're all very interested in hearing what PayPal is doing with OpenStack. Can you give us a brief summary?
Sure. I think, at a high level, we're really just trying to push as a service as far as we can and at scale. And we've had a lot of success in bringing enablement. For us, the IaaS play is really about enabling the business from an agility and a velocity standpoint. And so, we have a lot of focus internally on that as a platform. As you noted, we've made some choice and some investments and some significant ones in our time relative to OpenStack. And we've just had some great success. We're using it really across our entire lifecycle, from our development community all the way into production, and we're doing it at a pretty significant scale.
How long ago did you start looking at OpenStack as a possibility?
So that happened about 2 years ago, within the last 24 months or so, and obviously we've been following it longer than that. For us, we watch to see where the contribution and really where the energy is happening, and where we see some movement in terms of things selfishly that are important to us. And as we looked at that very quickly led us into the OpenStack community, just in terms of, again, where we saw a lot of the innovation and a lot of the energy happening. So a little bit more than 2 years into that journey now, and again, had a fairly fast ramp up. Within about 6 months, we were beginning to really make it real for us. And then we've been spending a lot of time over the last year moving it into scale and operationalizing it, and doing those things you need to do to make it robust and reliable.
How long would you say it took you to get up to speed until you became comfortable and your engineers are spending more time getting their work done and less time cracking the nut of OpenStack?
It depends on where you are in the stack. I think OpenStack is obviously a collection of packages and modules. In certain areas, we probably had faster traction than others. When you're talking about the basic API capabilities down into Compute, Nova, and at the time Quantum, I think those were much more straightforward for us as we moved up into bringing more mature automation and orchestration into play, and so in this case around Heat. That's where I think we spent a little more time learning and discovering. But in general, I'd say we were up and functional at that sort of I'm good and I don't need people standing over my shoulder within about 90 days. And at that point, it was just a lot of experimentation and a lot of make it break at scale. So we understood where the breakpoints were relative to performance and things like that. And that's an ongoing learning iteration that we're always doing.
I take it you started out small and grew the team. Can you tell us a bit about your philosophy and what steps you took to make sure that early successes were enabled and capitalized upon?
Sure. I think, and always you want to have a clear vision of what you're trying to solve for. So not only of what do we look like, but who's the we, right? Who are we solving for? Generally you have your right and your left hand in terms of your product folks and your operational folks that you're attempting to enable. For us, we made sure to have it was a fairly small senior team. I think is what we found worked best. Start off small and with senior folks. Because you're just going to encounter a lot of new things, and you need folks who are used to being able to pivot, being able to work through things, and if necessary around things, and not necessarily take backward steps. For us, it was always about forward momentum. Also, I think if you get the right senior people, now you come back to who are you delivering for. So in both cases, we're not just delivering for machines, if you will, a thing, we're delivering for people. And so understanding the experience of that and what that looked like and what that felt like, whether as a developer, or a NOC admin, or a systems engineer, we spent a bit more time, sort of if I were to reference the agile model, doing the customer-driven innovation, making sure we really were sitting with our clients and understanding the vision of what they were trying to be. And I think that helped us with clarity, because as you move forward with this, there's just a lot of capabilities. There's actually a lot of things you can solve. There's a lot of directions. It's sort of be careful you don't boil the ocean. And so having a crisp clarity of this is that first end state, here's the client, here's how they feel value from that, both in terms of true capability, measurable, but also qualitatively. That was really important to us.
Can you give us an example of the kind of use cases or specific measurable things that you looked for in your first forays?
Sure. I think on the provisioning side, it was fairly straightforward, which you have metrics right now that basically say how long does it take you to get, from dock to rack and from rack up into a provisioned state, and what's the labor that it takes you to do that. Also, what are the triggers that you use? And that was an easier one for us because that's really where a lot of the initial power of an IAS play comes in, which is I can automate and I can make more predictable and reliable a provisioning flow, and I can do that just in a much more efficient way. So that was an easier one for us. We got down to literally the metrics around provisioning time. One of our biggest metrics, to be honest, was manual, meaning any process in the provisioning pipeline in that life cycle that was manual. We had a certain seek and kill mentality to it, of with circumspection around business risk. In general, the idea was if it's manual, you want to automate it completely, and that allows us then to create a complete end-to-end orchestration. So the types of metrics that we were looking at were literally, did you eliminate the manual step, and then what was the vacuum time that you've saved to do that? What was the quality relative to the consistency of the delivery, right? How reliable was it? Did you have to do any sort of rework and things like that? On the developer side, you're back dealing much more with people and how they feel about an experience, and so the metrics there are some basic ones around same idea. How fast in this case can you move somebody from bare metal to a fully connected IDE, but have that be a very seamless, frictionless experience. I think that's key. And so we had different metrics. We had some qualitative metrics that we use. We call them pulse scores. To really understand how people were feeling about those things. And then we had some, again, very specific metrics around scale, performance. As we moved OpenStack in particular forward, we actually saw some pretty tremendous performance gains just relative to certain workflow operations within the development lifecycle, build, deploy capabilities. And so we had those as metrics as well.
What kind of early use cases did you focus on?
So the earliest use cases were really for, we didn't go small. We went for the two big ones, which was how do you enable production scaling, and then how do you enable the developer process, the developer lifecycle of moving into beginning to code through build, deploy, and through releasing code live to site. So we went after the ones that we knew were the ones we wanted to end up with, and then we were just circumspect about the teams and the workflows that we used. It's sort of like, I liken it to how you bring up a new network. You sort of stand it up in parallel, and then you slowly, you move one route over or one VLAN over. It was a similar concept of we wanted to go after the end-to-end vision of what we wanted to bring in terms of enablement to the business. So the use cases were right off the gate from the very start, the two primary ones: production enablement and enable the developer.
That's quite ambitious. I would say that that's relatively atypical. Customers usually start out adoption getting their feet wet. Why did you feel brave enough to take on a big thing at first?
I think it was so that we had a certain philosophy of technique, and the term I'll use is the risk tolerant and the risk averse train. So you have your run the business, which is your architecture and your stack of where you're at today, and that you need to maintain that. And then you have a vision. We actually called it the vision stack of what you want to be in 18 to 24 months. And it's not a mock-up, it's a real, true end-to-end stack. It's just maybe it's not ready for scale. And then you have that middle ground that's really focused on, but how do I get you there? Meaning, what are I literally may need some new technologies or tools that enable a certain level of integration, or I may need a certain capability that literally allows a team's workflow to move over. And so we focused on those two aspects, and what we ended up with was fundamentally three trains, if you will, or three tracks: the run the business track, the vision track, and then the arc track, the one that gets you there. And you need to really do all three. And if you didn't, the problem is the model I think you're inferring is it's a serialized approach. And it's a right approach. It's what ensures hey, you're reliable, you're operationalized, you're ready for scale. The problem is if you just do that, you will serialize yourself there in about 18 to 24 months, and your competitors will have leapfrogged you. And if you do the other one, if you do that vision stack one, you will obviously end up with something that is pretty amazing in terms of capability, but really is incredible relative to operational at scale, and especially in our space. So we invested in all three. That's I guess where I'm coming to, is we felt comfortable doing it because we quickly stood up that vision stack, and we very quickly also invested in parallel into that middle track, that what we call the risk-averse track, that said, I'm not quite there, and you need to find all of the things you need to do to get me there whole and at scale. And it worked for us. It allowed us to basically then bring in workflows in as at our choice, and prove the point. Prove where you had a little more time you needed for a given workflow to get the level of maturation. And every company has workflows that in many ways can take advantage of an accelerated path, but you have to have the landing zone for them to run in. Otherwise, you'll very quickly find that you have capabilities that just aren't ready for prime time.
It takes a lot of backing and commitment and a bold overall vision to say, we're going to crack this nut in parallel, 3 streams at a time, and we're going to tackle the big stuff first.
Yeah, you have to be committed. There's no doubt about it. There's a phrase I have on my sig line, and it's on the wall of my conference room. Many of these things, it's not a matter of knowledge or of even your understanding. It's about a strength of will, and you're right. You have to have a commitment. It helps. We have very talented, committed folks on my team. I have great leaders underneath me who really are passionate about driving enablement for the business. So not tail wagging the dog, not technologists trying to just drive tech forward, but really, how do I improve the life of this aspect of the business, or the life of my partners here inside? And when you combine, I think, a path, a leadership and a path that says, I believe as long as you follow that, we can get there but safely, but also in a very robust way. It actually isn't that hard. What happens is, as you're doing that journey, there's lots of little landmines that just come up. Those are the danger points. That's where a little bit of the the FUD, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt can come into play, and you have to be prepared to manage your way through that. I'll give you a good example. As we were bringing OpenStack into a particular area, there was a couple days where we saw some pretty dramatic performance degradation. And you got a whole bunch of people saying, OpenStack, are you sure? 2 days later, not only was it solved, it was faster than the base system, the thing we were moving from. And so it was a matter of, it's a good example of how you have to manage your client through that arc. This is in many ways not about the tech; it's about the change. This is a change management, in many ways, exercise, and how you move people through a big change like this was as important to us. So, how you market, how you communicate, how you engage your client, because you're going to iterate. It's just the nature of the beast as you're moving these things forward, and there are going to be some landmines you hit, and your ability to have the will to move forward and work through and not take a step back, and your ability to manage your client through that without them, churning too much is really key.
I'm smiling. It's hard to hear it over the over the audio. Managing the change of radical technology shift is one of the topics that's very close to my heart. How far along in the change process are you now? How close to your envisioned end state are you?
I'd say we're fairly close in terms of the capabilities on the production side. I think what we're doing is we're trying to drive ourselves a lot of the maturity of operationalization that we don't necessarily see yet, either in the community, or we don't see enough energy in that area. And so we're trying to bring a little bit more mature focus on monitoring and high availability and so forth. But we've achieved the capability, and we're able to deliver it in a reliable, risk-managed way on the production side today. So I think in many ways we're there, and we're just iterating through how do you bring greater visibility, and how do you incorporate that in a better way with monitoring and so forth. On the developer side, I think we're just beginning to do that. We've demonstrated those capabilities. We've proven them to various teams, and as you bring some of these pretty powerful capabilities to bear, particularly in the product development lifecycle, as you can imagine, there tends to be a very pent-up demand. And you show somebody a capability, and you're like, wow, how fast can I get that? At that point, you really need to, again, now you come back to, now I'm really focused on how I manage you, a person, through that change. Mm-hmm. And we're very focused on, is it ready for scale? Do we have all the things that we need to understand scale from a user's point of view, which in many ways is different than the more predictable. In many ways, production is a more predictable thing, right? The transactions are fairly normalized. The scale fluctuates, but the widget, if you will, around the transaction and what we have to service in prod is somewhat normalized, where the development workflows, they're much more variant. And so being able to deliver that in a very robust, consistent, reliable experience is our focus right now, because we've demonstrated the capability. And so a lot of our focus from what we call H2 from end of June forward through end of year has really been on, now how do we bring a higher level of insight and visibility and reliability to the more fluctuant workflows, the more, the developer workflows, because, the very nature is, hey, they can come in and they can try things you never thought they would try. But you need to be prepared for that, and you need to be able to deliver a consistent, reliable experience, even in that flow. That's a tougher game, a tougher nut to crack, but that's where we're focused on right now.
So that our listeners can understand the scale of your deployments and your customer base, how many developers and teams and applications, what can you tell us about the ways that you're using OpenStack, and so we can understand the scale?
Sure. I'll give you, I think like all companies, we're a little bit circumspect on going too much into definitive numbers, but we're talking about thousands and thousands of developers every day who we service on the development side. On the production side, we are talking thousands upon thousands upon thousands of instances and hosts and so forth that we're using to enable provisioning capabilities and as-a-service capabilities to production. And in terms of workflows, it's everything. Again, at this point, on the production side, we're taking many of our most primary and critical workflows, and we're directing them, through that part of the stack. It's more about a percentage sort of a basis that we do on that. And then on the developer side, it's just a matter of, again, how deep into each team's workflows are you going. We're touching every team now. And so we're bringing those enablements across all 3,000 developers. It's just different levels of capability. The cadence is a little bit different depending on a team's ability to adopt that. In some cases, they have to somewhat maybe adjust a workflow or how they work to take advantage of some of those enabling capabilities. But it's a large scale for us. It's not a small thing, and the breadth of it is company-wide.
That's huge. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, happy to.
What surprised you most when you first started looking at OpenStack?
I'd say it's one of those things that probably shouldn't have been a surprise, but like most things, the focus and energy tends to be on feature function and capability first, and the maybe less exciting, less sexy things around operationalization tend to get focused on last. And so we, what I'll call the V1 world, the world that we lived in as we moved through V1 in late 90s and 2000s and even maybe earlier, has become fairly reliable and fairly predictable, that traditional infrastructure world, and the capabilities around it, high availability, monitoring, so forth, true HA, not just failover. Those things have come along for the ride over the last decade or more. It was a bit of a surprise to find how little energy there was around those operationalization capabilities, I guess is the way I'd say it. A tremendous focus and energy on the pure feature function. This is the API, this is how it talks to this piece of infrastructure, here's how you bring ubiquitous programmatic access to that thing, and great energy there. As you moved into an operational model and said, so how are we doing, high availability? The techniques are, well, there's nothing really that does that, yet, and so you end up using what I would call V1 techniques. You make multiple stacks, you wrap them behind, multiple controllers and load balancers, and that's failover. That's not really high availability. And for us, particularly in the financial services space, we have a transactional requirements that we need to be able to meet to and adhere to, and so we had to focus a lot on doing that ourselves, to be honest. And then, we don't mind it in the sense of we love the open source community, we love the contribution model, we love the energy that we can get from that, and we like contributing back. And so part of it is, well, then that's okay. We can develop with the community, we can be a driver for some of those things, and even better, we can contribute those things back to the community. There was an article that came out, I think, about a week ago about some of the things that we've been doing with the product that came originally from Netflix called Argus, and what we've done with that, with their monitoring tools. And it's pretty exciting stuff. We love being able to work with the community and move these back, but it was surprising that there weren't more folks out there spending more time developing some of those underlying operate at scale capabilities, particularly around monitoring and HA. Can
you give some advice to people who are adopters, who are coming at it now, and who will want more maturity out of the gate?
Sure. The short answer is they exist, but they won't necessarily be at the same tiering level that you would hope they'd be as you moved up the stack. The techniques you're going to use are you're going to bring Nagios to bear, and you're going to be doing, physical and virtual clusters, and you're going to be leveraging your traditional load balancing techniques of standing up multiple stacks. And the answer is get comfortable that you're going to be doing that in the more traditional physical infrastructure way than necessarily high up into the stack. As an example, if you're looking for high availability around RabbitMQ, you need to be prepared to leverage APIs and AMQP and different techniques to be able to talk to those modules and those capabilities to stitch together a complete operational view. And we do that. We do that all the time. We've done that for years on the V1 infrastructure. I think there was more of an expectation of, hey, as you come into this package, it has all those hooks. And the answer is, it has the hooks, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to hook into yet. And you may be hooking those things into some of your V1 infrastructure, and just get comfortable with that.
In other words, it's not a product; it's a set of tools.
You got it. And you're going to have to, create that bit of a grab bag of tools. We all have them. We have the grab bag of monitoring and things like that. Mm-hmm. It'll be lower in the stack in the more traditional way that you do those things. The biggest, if you will, the biggest opportunity and maybe danger when you bring as a service into play is really around automation and orchestration, because you're in many ways obfuscating what had been either a manual process or right in front of the user before. And so that's the other area, is just you need to really focus on the capability and what it means to how you normally service that capability, because in many ways you have created a level of abstraction now. You brought a great capability to play, but your ability to lay hands is a little more abstracted.
Those are the stages that new systems tend to go through as they evolve through the maturity levels.
You bet.
One last question, Ryan. What advice would you have to a company that's just starting out today, looking at OpenStack, trying to make heads or tail of it, and figuring out what they should do with it?
I guess two things. I'd say get over the fear. You're gonna encounter fear. You're gonna encounter some resistance. It's ready for you to jump in and to make real business value for. It's true and it's real, and you don't need to treat it like, I'm not even sure if I can bring this anywhere into my organization. You can. You need to be prepared for the change and moving people through the change of that. And you need to be prepared that the cadence, you may have to do different techniques, whether it's our technique of multiple tracks and trains or other techniques to keep the momentum going. But what you will find as you continue to do that is very robust, very actually reliable capability under the hood, and you just need to figure out the right operational model of how you bring that together. But the one thing you shouldn't do is not do it. You need to jump in. You need to be doing it. You need to be bringing these IaaS capabilities into play, and OpenStack is a great foundation to do that.
Ryan, I want to thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.